Hey everybody, this is an introduction video to EdUBudgie, which is kind of a project that I worked on my own over the past summer, which is to take Ubuntu Linux and to make it suitable out of the box for high schoolers, and I think probably for the first couple of years for college students as well. And it should work for teachers and administrators and other folks also, and that's sort of the idea, to offer a free alternative that people can put onto old Windows laptops, new Windows laptops, and x86 Chromebooks also. There's a couple of caveats, and I'll go through some of them along the way, and I'm going to try to keep this to 15 or 20 minutes, but no promises. I think that should be the max though. As for what you see here, a couple of things. One, this is running in a virtual machine. It's not running on the actual hardware. The only reason is I just don't have a way to record from the actual hardware other than using like a phone to take a picture of the screen, and that would look terrible. So this is on a virtual machine, and because of that, you get this little menu down below there. And I can sort of take it away, but it's still there. You should not have that unless you're running it in a virtual machine, and if you are, then you already know everything I'm about to say, so you can close the video. The next thing is, what have I done to this? So since it came out of the box, and since I installed it, I did have to do 2 or 3 things just to make it run on a virtual machine that you will not have to do. I changed the screen size so that it looks right. What else did I do? I guess that was mostly it. I installed some drivers that you will not have to install. They should be included for you out of the box. The other thing is I ran an update. Now, one thing that you'll notice, after you install it, this top menu bar will be centered in the middle, but after it was updated, the setting changed slightly. We can get that back, and then I'll start the actual intro. To get it back to the way it was to begin with, you can click on the menu. This is like the start menu. Type in settings, come to Budgie desktop settings, come to top panel, settings again, and click dock mode. And that is what it will look like when you first install the thing, just like this, with this desktop, with those icons, and so on. So I guess without further ado, may as well start the tour. So again, this is tailored for high schoolers and university students. And there's a lot of reasons why I chose the programs that I chose. Some things some people may disagree with, but I think they were the right decisions. So here's the desktop background. You can change the desktop background. The interface is a lot like Windows in that you can right-click on lots of stuff. So for instance, I can right-click and just do change desktop background, and then we can get a different one. You can choose to add your own picture if you like. We can just go with one of the built-in ones. So something like this, something like that. Now, something to note too is that this will be a little bit slower than it will run on an actual machine because it's running on a virtual machine. So it may seem a little bit clunkier. It's also running on a 12-year-old workstation, so like, and running inside of Windows. So like, try it out, and you'll find that it's much speedier. As for the minimum requirements, this should be run on, it has to be an x86 machine. And if you don't know what that is, it means it can't run on ARM. It can run on most Chromebooks that are x86. I usually use it on an Acer C720p touchscreen, which is a 1.4 gigahertz dual-core Celeron with 4 gigs of memory. Those are probably the minimum specs you would want to use. So think of at least a dual-core device made in the last 10 years, let's say, and with at least 4 gigs of memory. It'll run on older stuff. I'm sure it would run on a Core 2 Quad, Core 2 Duo. It would probably run okay on only 2 gigabytes of RAM, but it would start to be prohibitively slow. As for like recommended specs, fastest thing you can buy, I don't know. Right now in this virtual machine, I have it set up to run with 6 cores that are old Intel Xeon processors, and I think 8 gigs of memory. But in this case, the video isn't great because of the virtual machine. Again, probably anything that's at least 2 cores with 4 gigs of memory in the last 10 years should run okay, as long as it's x86 based, Intel or AMD. So anyways, these are a whole bunch of settings here. And this is just to give you an idea of the settings panel. This was the desktop one that I showed you, but there's lots of others. So network, Bluetooth, if you have Bluetooth devices, you can change some of the notifications, search. One of the things that you'll need to do when you first install and set this up is to sign in. Now, you can sign in using Google, so if you use Classroom, this is a good place to start. Log into your Google account. I'm going to pause the video briefly so that you all don't see all of my login info, but I'll be right back with you. Okay, so once you've logged in, you'll see this screen, and you scroll down, it tells you the permissions, click allow, and then you'll have these things checked. You can uncheck them, you can keep them checked, it's up to you and whatever your IT people say. And then you can see I'm logged in. This is the same username that I use for YouTube anyway, so it doesn't really matter. There are others here too. Nextcloud is a file sharing service. Facebook, you can log in with more than one Google account if you want. So normally I would log in with my personal account and then also my school account and then also my extra account if I were doing this on the actual machine that I use every day. I don't want to show you all of that, but you can have more than one Google or more than one Facebook account. And logging in like that does a couple of things that I'll get to in a moment. There are other settings here, things like sharing and sound. For sound, it's kind of basic and kind of easy to understand. Same with power. So there are some power saving things here. I will note, in general, Linux is not as good about power saving as Windows. It's probably not going to matter if it's on a desktop. It might cost a few cents more per year, but on a laptop, it will use your battery a little bit more, and this is not a laptop. So you might want to keep the screen a little bit dim and just sort of be aware of if you're on a higher power profile or not. And but generally the default settings are pretty good anyways for laptops. And then there's some different display things. You can scale it as well. Mouse and touchpad stuff. If you have a mouse and a touchpad, you'll see mouse and touchpad. So like if you have your laptop connected with a touchpad and then a mouse plugged in, you'll see them both. And then there's some keyboard stuff, printer stuff. This is like ask what to do if you plug in a USB device, region and language. Normally I would switch this to English United States as well so that it shows me like Fahrenheit instead of Celsius, but I'll leave that for now. You can add or remove users here, and you can make it so that you automatically log in here as well. What I would recommend for use in education is the IT person set up the account and set up the laptop or desktop as the root user or the admin user. And then you have students, teachers, admins, whoever, be regular users with fewer permissions. That will just help to stop any sort of confusion or issues with installing things that they shouldn't install and so on. And that's pretty typical for most educational systems. Default apps, date and time stuff, and about. So this gives you an idea of what I'm running. This shows an x5660 with 6 cores. That's true, but again, it's in a virtual machine. And so like my actual computer has 48 gigs of memory. This is showing only 8 because that's what I allocated to it. And then some of this other stuff, like you can see virtualization here. So let's go to settings. This is sort of a little panel that gives you some additional like control panel things. So notifications, and you can have applets. So date and time, again, is still set to Turkish. Change the volume here. If you had apps that were playing music, they would show up there. You have the power options. You can open up the calendar from here and change date and time settings. And let's check out the calendar real quick because that's a nice one. Now, what's nice about this is if you select online accounts here and you log into an account that actually has things in their calendar, they will show up on here. So like my school Google account has all of my classes listed in it and the dates and times that they occur. They would all show up right here with whatever info that I put into Google. It would be here in calendar. And the same goes for the email client. So if I type in just email, Geary is the email client that is in here by default. And I don't know if I have any emails on this account, but you'll see that it updates after a couple of minutes, and oh, look at that, security alerts. And then it would show any other information that you have in your emails there. So I'm not gonna focus on that, but it automatically sets it up when you sign into online accounts. That's the first thing you should do. You should have your IT person update it, sign into online accounts, and the second thing you should do is sign into Google Chrome itself. So we can uncheck this one, leave that one, click OK. That's typical because it's a new installation. I would sign in again right here. Once you've done those two sign-ins, you're ready to go. Computer's all set up. And another thing that's nice here, if I open this up, let's see, sorry, I had hidden files being shown. This is typically what you'll see, this right here, similar to Windows. And in fact, when I made this, I chose Windows icons or Windows-like icons, specifically so it would be familiar to the users. But the other thing you see here is my Gmail account listed here. If I click that, this is the stuff that I have in my Google Drive. You can interact with that directly, just like you would on just like you would on a Windows machine with files. I won't get too much into that because there's a bunch to each of these things, but I want to focus on some of the more sort of major things. If you have a laptop, Slimbook battery can help you to create a couple of profiles, like a low power profile, a balanced profile, a high performance profile. That's a good way to make sure that your battery lasts as long as possible. There's a ton of programs that I've included here, things like Calculate, which you can see I've got an icon up here already for. On the website, by the way, there are short descriptions for most of the programs, or at least the major programs that I have mentioned. Not all of them that are installed, but many of them. And so, like for instance, Calculate is nice for math students, math teachers, because there's a whole bunch of different stuff that you can do in here. So like you can change it to economics and calculate the effective interest rate quickly and easily. Sorry about that. You can go to trigonometry and look up the inverse hyperbolic cosecant if you have any idea what that means. I don't remember. So Calculate's a really nice one. There are two Office suites on here, LibreOffice, which is typical of Ubuntu, and also WPS. So if I come down here to Office, you can see LibreOffice and WPS. The reason for that is I wanted LibreOffice because it's well known, it's been around forever, and it's got this math component that makes it a little bit easier for writing math functions into like a Word doc type of thing. But also WPS simply because it's basically a clone of Microsoft Office. And so if I do a new document, you can see it's really similar to Microsoft Office, and the hope is that this will be familiar to users. You should know now that there are some programs that are proprietary on here. I did not follow a free and open source only sort of mentality for this because education won't work right now with only open source solutions. It's just the way it is. We need to have some things that are proprietary, that are closed source to be effective teachers and students. So that's just how it is. And that's, for instance, why you see the browser choice that I've made rather than like just regular Chromium. There's a whole bunch of things like calculator linking program for math users. Shutter is for organizing your photos if you were doing photography in art class. Atom is one for editing text and doing things like code. There are some administration things. GeoGebra's for math. I forget what this one is. I think that's Yep, fractions, math as well. Geography. There are K-word quiz, which is a flashcard program where you can type in what you want for the front and the back of the flashcard, and then you can actually use it to quiz one another as students or as teacher and students or whatever. There are a lot of programs that are really useful for education and not many that aren't. And I'm just going to sort of quickly give you an overview here. So diagram editors are kind of like Visio. Dia is specifically. Ebook viewer, that's Calibre or Calibre, I think it's Calibre is how they pronounce it. So if you've got a collection of ebooks that your students need to read, or if you are a student, there's an ebook viewer so that you don't have to use something like Google Playbooks, but you can if you want to, of course. FreeCAD is like an AutoCAD replacement. Blender is for 3D animation. GNU is for photo editing and is one of the well-known Linux ones. Inkscape is for vector graphic editing, again for editing images. There's a couple of those. Another CAD one. LibreOffice has a drawing component as well. Photo Manager. Let's see what else. Again, email. KDE Connect is nice because it allows you to connect your Android phone to the device. So like if you get an email from your teacher or from a student or an administrator, you can have your phone somewhere else and have it pop up on your computer screen, and you can do a bunch more. One of the nicest things about it, and I don't have it connected now, is if you lose your phone, you can click ring on the KDE indicator, which if we connected it would be right up here, and it will ring your phone so you can find it if it's like under a couch cushion or whatever. Rambox is a multi-protocol messenger, so you can connect your WhatsApp to it, things like Telegram, Skype, Gmail, even open up Calendar. You can do a ton of stuff in this Electron-based app. And when you open it, or have it open automatically, all of your stuff will log in at once without having to go to a bunch of different websites or open a bunch of different tabs. It does it all at one time after you've logged in once, previously, after you've set it up. Let's see. MindMaster is a nice mind mapping program. Again, it's got WPS and LibreOffice. OpenDrive is a Google Drive client that is used to synchronize folders with Google Drive. So you can have it automatically download all of your Google Drive content and then again upload it, which is similar to the online accounts function, but with online accounts it's streaming, and so it doesn't download all of that stuff unless you go to open it up. With OpenDrive, it will actually create a backup on your local device. Some people want that security, or some people want to be able to work without being connected to the internet all the time. That's what OpenDrive is for. There are, of course, some administrative things in here too, like if your particular computer needs some additional driver, like NVIDIA graphics drivers, your IT person can set that up through here. What else do we have? It's more or less Windows without all of the junk and telemetry and constant phoning home and terrible updates. Updating on this is much easier, and if you saw in settings down at the bottom there's an update function. There's also a similar update function within the software sources here, which you can open this up to see. Let's see. Nope, not that one. That's software settings. Sorry. If we do, yeah, just software. So here's your little welcome screen. Okay, let's go shopping. This is a bunch of software that if you are the administrator, you can install to add on to what's already there. And there's way too much stuff for me to even go over it all. It's basically everything that's available to Ubuntu is available in here. But that said, there are still going to be packages that you might want to download directly from like GitHub or from some other manufacturer or whatever. But if Ubuntu has it, it should be in this software store because this is a version of Ubuntu. It's a clone. And the reason for that is I don't have the finances, the time, or frankly the hardware to create an actual separate distribution. And so if you need support, you can ask me, of course. You can check the Ubuntu forums. If you need paid support though, you can pay Ubuntu for it. They have plans. And so I kind of had to step away from that, being only one person. But this should get you close to where you need to be, I think. there's so much stuff that it's difficult to go over it all here. For instance, like Basic 256 is, well, you can see it gives you a console that you can type in basic programs and run basic programs from for young learners who you want to teach basic programming to. Calcium is a really cool one, in my opinion, for chemistry students and teachers. You can click on anything and get information about it, but there's so much more. You can come into, for instance, like molecular editor and edit different molecules in here, and it will come up with a drawing, and I don't totally know how to use it, to be honest with you. You can show different types of the periodic table in different formats. So like this one is just the transition elements. You can go to, let's see, perform calculations. Yeah. So like if you wanted to do an equation balancer, you kind of have to follow the format down below, but like if you wanted to see, okay, if I have, you know, a gasoline mixed with whatever else and this and that, and there's a chemical reaction, what does it turn into in the end? And this will give you, is an easy way to do it without having to remember moles and all of that stuff from chemistry. It's another tool, you know? Nuclear calculators with half-life and all of that sort of stuff. So let's get out of this one. Again, there's a bunch of programming stuff like Geany is another, basically a text editor or code editor. This has also, let's see here, I can find it. It has things like VLC, OBS for recording, OpenShot video editor. Kazam is another screen recording one. Cheese is for webcams. Audacity is for audio. So those are things that might be used less frequently by students and more frequently by teachers who are especially dealing with the COVID crisis and need to, you know, do recordings and things like that. There's a lot of settings. There was one in here in particular I was looking for, but I don't recall the name of it. Let's see, Scratch, that's it. Scratch for just getting students into programming. Scratch, of course, is a programming language, and this gives them an interface to kind of see like what are the inputs and the outputs if I start to write code. This one's a little bit, you know, sort of really for younger students, but it's not a bad introduction for, let's say, 9th graders who have never done any programming. And they can start to use Scratch for that. So anyways, that's really my time. It's been about 20 minutes. Again, this was just supposed to be an introduction, and the idea is you can move to this without having to pay for the costs of Windows and all of the different software on Windows. You can use old Chromebooks for this as long as they're the x86 type. And let me see here. And this is the full installation, which you can see out of 42 gigabytes, there's 23 gigabytes free. So uses about 20 gigabytes of space for the full install. If you saw my installation video as well, there is also a minimal install option, which I believe will fit within 16 gigabytes if you have smaller Chromebooks. 32 gigabytes is really the minimum you should be using, but you may try that minimal install if you're using a 16 gigabyte Chromebook and see if the install fits on it. The point is, if you were to have all of this functionality in a Windows device, you'd probably be looking at least 100 gigabytes of space taken up. This fits within 23 and is equally as functional because it doesn't have all the trash and BS and all of the different like advertising things and telemetry things and calling back to Microsoft or other companies. And it's not totally virus-free, but pretty much virus-free. You've got to kind of work at it to get viruses to stick on Linux. And there are antiviruses available if you want it. So safety, security, all of that stuff's there. One other key feature is by default, the program cockpit is installed here, which I'm not going to get into, but I will simply show you. As you can see, it's installed. If you are a Linux user or an admin, you may already know what Cockpit is. Cockpit is a place where the admins can log into other devices, and it's primarily used for servers. But the idea here is by having it on all of the students and staff's computers, IT, when everyone's in school and they're on the same network and everything, IT is able to use their administrator's account to log into different devices, to make sure that they're up to date, that they're not running software that they shouldn't be, to monitor things and make sure that, for that matter, you could even have it set so that maybe every half an hour, have a command run that checks to see if, let's say, the Spotify app is running and then kills it if it is. So it's a little bit of Big Brother, but not really in a bad way. Remember, the focus of this distribution is to keep students working on what they're supposed to be working on. And don't get me wrong, iPads are great for middle schoolers because they're toys with some educational value. Chromebooks are another good way to transition from iPads into a more full-fledged computer like what this would be. But definitely for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and I would argue for even 8th and 9th grade, this is a great solution. And it's especially good for schools who have already invested in Chromebooks, but after 3 years or after 4 years, don't have the money to buy a whole new fleet of Chromebooks. Have all of these used Chromebooks that are still perfectly functional, but have run out of support. Install this on it, try this on it, at least for the older grades. I think it would be a good way to transition students into the professional world, into the university life, by having a full-fledged operating system, rather than the simplicity of a Chromebook, rather than the just toyishness of an iPad. So anyways, I'm long for time here, so that's kind of the idea. Hopefully that was informative. You can write stuff in comments. You can find more info on the webpage. You can download a copy of this on the webpage. If you break your own computer, that's not on me, that's on you. I accept no responsibility unless the thing is just all terrible, in which case, I don't know, yell in the comments. All right, thanks for your time, everybody. Hopefully someone finds this, useful. We'll see.